Hey, my name's David G. I want to talk about an application called ZTPManager and what ZTPManager can do for you. So, what is it? Well, in simple terms, it's a manager for the isc-dhcp server. And for brevity, I'll probably just call it the DHCP server at this point going forward. So, what ZTPManager will do is manage the dhcp.conf files and the isc-dhcp server file, which contains the interface bindings. It also generates initial device configuration from templates, which are shipped with the ZTPManager. And it will also manage the DHCP server by restarting it every time the files have changed. And what I mean by that is, let's say every time we add a host to the ZTPManager and then hit the save operation through a HTTP post, it regenerates the dhcp.conf, the isc-dhcp server file, and it'll also generate the initial device configurations. So the way it does this, it offers two sockets. One is a TCP web server on port 80, which offers the delivery of configuration files and device images. The other port, which is configurable, is the HTTP JSON API. So this is the basic setup. On a multi-NIC system, you're going to have to know which interface that it is that you want to deliver the DHCP service on. Beyond that, it's all very straightforward, and the great news is we can go and actually install this with a one-line configuration, which is pretty cool. So what you see in front of you now is the GitHub account, Network Bootstrap, and the repository ZTPManager. Now, if I just go back here, oops, we've got three repos. We've got the assets, we've got the code, and we've got the manager. Now, the manager is actually the installer itself. The code, it's all written in Golang, ignore JavaScript, it's picked up on the docs. And then we've got the ZTPManager assets. Now, the ZTPManager does a git clone on the ZTPManager assets. So in this directory, we have the ZTPManager application, the ZTPManager MD5 sum, an off-the-shelf configuration file for ZTPManager. Don't forget, this isn't the dhcpd.conf file. This is the configuration for the actual ZTPManager application. A README, which is just not very exciting. The license, which is a BSD3 clause. And we've got the templates directory. Now, currently, there is only one template. So we've got the Junos directory and a Junos.template. Now, this isn't Ginger 2. Remember, this is written in Go. So this is Go's standard templating system. If you've done some Ginger 2 templating, don't be scared. It's very, very similar. Just do some background reading and take this example now. The reason you might want to look at this is because these keywords, the NTP server, the fixed IP, here we have, look, the range index server, DNS servers. The interesting thing is you can reuse those keywords on other templates. And as long as the tagging system, you change the tag from Junos to, let's say, something else, to iOS XE or Arista, EOS, it's quite possible to multi-vendor this. So let's go back to the ZTPManager. Now, three more things. There's a doc site. So you're not just relying on the GitHub docs. There is a Go report scorecard, which actually goes against the code repository, which you've just previously seen, or literally seen the repo. And there's also a Travis CI build, which happens every time I make some code changes, and all three are currently green. Now, I'm going to go to the docs because I think the docs are just a lot more sexier. So let's go straight down to usage. This is the content of the ZTPManager configuration file. And what happens is there is a shell script installer which changes the server URL information, and it also changes the DHCP iface to reflect whatever your environment is. Below here we have hosts. Now, this is technically a map. So we have an Ethernet address, which is how the DHCP server can relate the rest of the information to the correct device. We have a fixed IP out of the lease range, which is up here, which is a subnet mask. I'll explain these two things in a moment, the non-config range low and the non-config range high. The vendor, this tag here basically says use a Junos template. We've got a host name, so that'll be demo01 for simpledemo.net. So this domain name field here is a DHCPD server. Most of these fields I've just transcribed from the dhcpd.conf. And then we've got the config image as well, which is going to be blank. And unless you have an image loaded into the images directory or whatever you've called it, leave it blank, else Junos will try and do an upgrade. I did say I'd explain these two things here. So what we have is a subnet that we're going to be doing DHCPD assignments from. We've got a non-config range low and a non-config range high. Now, 20 is the start and 25 is the end of a small selection of IP addresses that we can use for devices that don't require the boot P. So this is the configuration file information, the image information. So we can just have devices that can get a default gateway, and that's it. So that's what they're for. The rest of it, other than these four, is self-explanatory. We've got the DHCPD location, which is the location to the dhcp.conf file. Now, I've pinned this ZTPManager application to use a very specific version of the DHCP, the isc-dhcp-server, which means I know by default where those files are. If we change a version in the install script at some point, these might change, so just be wary going forward. And this is an early release. I don't see any issues at the moment. Now, these four things here, we've got the HTTP configs location and the HTTP images location. These two entries here are to configure the actual file server that sits on the DHCP subnet to offer configuration files and images files. So if we go to the device server URL and then /configs, what happens is it looks in this value here. So it basically says, well, actually the configurations are in the configurations directory, from the same directory the application was launched from. Now, this can be relative or it can be absolute. Fine. So the same is true for the images as well. Right. That's the basic stuff. Now, you'll be pleased to know I've gone through some of this. I've explained to the best of my abilities. That's probably a lie. I've explained initially what these fields are. I'll improve things. I've also included curl helpers here in case you want to use Postman or something like that, and you can just kind of transcribe this information into there. Right now it uses HTTP basic auth. If you want SSL, your best route might be to put Nginx in front of the service. If you say, actually, well, no, this is a critical thing, then what I'll do is I'll build an SSL with probably, let's encrypt. For now, it's just over HTTP. Right. Let's go and take a look at the installation here. So I'm just going to copy and paste this. And by the way, if you want to go ahead and take a go at the manual installation, you're absolutely free to do that. These instructions are missing some information at the moment. What I'm missing is you have to copy across the templates directory and the config.toml as well, which you're going to need. Other than that, the instructions are there. I will make sure I've gone through this again and I'll update those. So just for the record here, the date is the 28th of March and I will deal with this. Okay, we've copied that. Let's go to the device. So now I'm on a Ubuntu server. I think this is 16.04. This is built in mind for 16.04 or 18.04 of Ubuntu on an x64 platform. Those two versions are long-term support releases, and I'm happy to support this ZTPManager on those two platforms. Now, we also need to check the interfaces with IPs. And the subnet I'm going to be delivering from, and this is really a default setup, is 192.168.50/24. And ENS34, the 192.168.10, is actually the management LAN that I've got for these kind of labs. So ENS33 is the interface. And I also happen to know that ZTPManager.networkbootstrap.com is the URL or basically the host name, host and domain for this particular server. So we're going to change this to ENS33. And I'm also going to change this to ZTPManager.networkbootstrap.com. Now, networkbootstrap.com. I always make a spelling mistake, which is never great. We hit return. Now, we're going to be running sudo because we need to do some high-level operations like open sockets on reserved ports. Now, what happens here is it tries to install curl. It will also install curl git. It will install the isc-dhcp-server pinned to the version that we need, which is version 4.3.5. It then does a git clone on the ZTPManager assets directory, which we've already gone through. It does an MD5 file comparison to make sure the binary still matches what we've just downloaded. It restarts the isc-dhcp server. It creates directories, config and image directories, and then it starts a service. Now, what we get is we get 4 messages. Two of these are from the web framework that I'm using, which is Golang Echo. Anybody familiar with Echo will probably recognize those two lines. JSON API started at ZTPManager.networkbootstrap.com on port 1323. And then we have ZTPManager.networkbootstrap.com started on port 80. So that's where the files are located. Now, what I'm going to do here is, first of all, I'm going to open Postman. So, ZTPManager.networkbootstrap.com 1323. And I've just refreshed this. So I've just done a get on the hosts it knows about currently. And there is one in the configuration file, the config.toml file that the system was booted with. So what we can do, we can get information around that particular host. So this is refreshed again. So we have the Ethernet address, we have the fixed IP address, we have the host name. Now, here's something of interest. The image file and the config file entries are empty. And the reason for this is a default entry, but until we hit the save post operation, and the config files won't be generated, and neither will the DHCPD or the ISC. So what I'm going to go and do is I'm just going to go ahead and hit save. And I'm just going to go and do a get. And now you can see the config file has got a file, which is particularly interesting. And if we now go to here, now I've just rigged this. So ztpmanager.networkbootstrap.com/configs demo01. And this is the completed configuration from the template with the information that was stored in ZTP Manager's memory. Now, this file is in the configs directory, and in theory, what should happen is we should be able to boot a VM. So we can turn a VM on as long as it goes through the easy ZTP process, and this is specific to Junos. Now we've done the install, we've gone through this, we've got the configurations. We're set to go for a demo. Now, operations that exist, we've got the get all, which gets all of the hosts that are configured on the ZTP Manager. We've got post, which means we can create. Now, this is the bare minimum JSON body that you need to create. So Ethernet address, fixed IP address, host name, and vendor. You don't need to enter any other information than these four things, providing you've got your basic configuration set up. You can do deletes, but make sure every time you do a post or a deletion, you hit save. And if you're entering entries into the configuration file by hand, make sure that you stop the ZTP Manager service first. Make your configuration changes, save the file, restart ZTP Manager. Because what will happen is if somebody else hits save, it will rewrite the configuration file, rendering your file changes incomplete, or let's say invalid. Right, at this point, we're in a really good place. What we're going to do now is we're going to launch a brand new 18.3.1 VMX virtual control plane image. So now we've got the MGD services started. We've now got to a point where the initial configuration is being created here. It won't be able to find the juniper.conf, so it's activating the factory configuration is exactly what we needed to happen to start this whole DHCP process off with ZTP. At this particular point, I'm not expecting it to take long, and in fact, I'm expecting to see the DHCP discovery happening in a moment. And normally there's 20 to 30 seconds in between the initial DHCP ACK and then the release as the device gets a new configuration and actually releases the address it had from the DHCP pool. Okay, we've got to the login screen. So far, so good. You can see the amnesiac in brackets, so this is a new machine. We've not seen any DHCP activity. Now the discover, the offer, the request, the acknowledgement. Well, that's not good. The MAC address is different. Okay, so what we're going to do here, I wasn't expecting this, but this is great, right? Because this is live. This is live, and this is how we do things. So I'm going to copy that MAC address. I'm going to open up Postman. I'm going to do a delete on 50.100. Unauthorized, that's fine. I've not obviously done a deletion. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to do this. Basic auth. I happen to know that is admin and password. Go back to the body. Actually, we don't need to do that. We've got a 202, that's fine. I'm going to go back to this. I'm going to change the MAC address. So 000C29C01A2D. Now I'm going to do this. Now if I go off and do a get, we can see now that the config is still there, the config file is still there, the MAC address has changed. So go back to the, sorry about this, the VMware console is painful. Now what I'm going to do here, so I'm just going to carry on tailing. So what's happened now, look, is the 192.168.50.100 address has been offered to the MAC address that's come up on ENS33. And then the DHCP release has happened as well, which suggests, even though our little faux pas of me putting the wrong MAC address in, we should now be able to do this. Log in with root. I'm expecting to see the password field. Now, let's take a look at the configuration. Name server is there, the host name is there, the domain name is there, everything is there. So everything from the template that was generated is now on board the device. So what you've actually seen live, or recorded live at least, is I didn't anticipate the MAC address changing on ESXi. So we've just purged it out of ZTPManager, put the new MAC address in with the new information, the device has taken the configuration. So hopefully this is convincing enough to say, hey, go give it a try. Personally, I'm quite pleased. So this is the initial video on ZTPManager. There will be more videos coming out. I will work on the manual process. Please don't forget the basics. Any change that you make on the HTTP JSON API, you're going to need to do the save operation on. Other than that, everything's very straightforward. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.